Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to have another wonderful session led by our partner, Dragonfly Mental Health, for their Dragonfly Global Migration World Mental Health Day event. So we are so happy to have Dr. Mary Huff here, and I believe we are going to have a wonderful session. So over to you, Dr. Mary.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel, and thank you all for having me here again today. We will get right into this, talking about the causes and remedies of burnout in a research environment. But first, we want to welcome you to World Mental Health Day. Here at Dragonfly, we are celebrating our global migration. And the idea here is that we could bring about a variety of topics to a variety of people across the country. And so what you'll see on this slide are the red dots, all of the places that are hosting a Dragonfly Global Migration event either today or in the next few days. Sometimes scheduling everything to run simultaneously can be a little tricky. So we are really grateful to have you all here with us today. We do want to say thank you to our sponsors for today's global migration. So we had a couple of different levels of sponsorships. We have our Emerald Dragonfly sponsors. Those are our highest level of sponsors. We had the Beckman Foundation, Lipotype, Dr. Aaron Cineros, as well as an anonymous donor who graciously allowed us to run these events. We also had a second level sponsors. So these 8 individuals, as you can see listed on the screen, were our Amethyst Dragonfly sponsors. And we also had a variety of our clients who were willing to participate with a financial donation so that they could have a program at their site as well as bring the Dragonfly programming to more institutions. So we just want to thank all of them, and we're really excited to get started. We always like to provide this disclaimer at the beginning. Dragonfly Mental Health is not a healthcare providing organization. I am not a clinician. I am not a healthcare provider. The information that I'm going to provide today does not qualify as medical advice and does not substitute for speaking to a medical professional. So if you are in crisis and you believe you need emergency help, I would recommend that you call emergency services or go to the nearest hospital. I will briefly introduce myself a little bit more. I will talk about Dragonfly Mental Health as an organization. So if you have not been able to participate in one of the previous Dragonfly Mental Health programs that we have done over the last couple of weeks, I'll give you a little bit of background information. Then I will talk about the basics of burnout. So what is burnout? What does it look like in the literature? How is it diagnosed clinically? What are the differences then between burnout and something like depression and anxiety? And then we'll have time for a little bit of Q&A at the end if you have any questions. A little bit about myself. I completed my PhD in behavioral neuroscience in 2016 at the University of Iowa. I was studying memory consolidation and specifically how various frequencies drive different types memory. Then moved on to do a postdoctoral training at the Stowers Institute for Medical Research, where I started to look at oligomerizing proteins in memory formation and specifically the family of CPEB proteins. While I was at Stowers, I started to participate in Dragonfly. So I became our consulting co-lead in 2021, which I still am actively participating in making sure that all of our clients, like you all, can get the programming that they need and then come out and deliver programs as well. My full-time job, however, I have moved into the nonprofit space. So I'm actually the chief operating officer at Newhouse, which is a domestic violence shelter in Kansas City, Missouri. Now, Dragonfly Mental Health has a broad approach to having these conversations in academic research settings. One, we believe in education. So it's just what we're doing here today. Coming in, giving everyone the information that they need, sometimes providing skill-based training, making sure that we are using an anti-stigma approach and talking about things, defining them in a way that everyone can understand. We also believe very strongly in community, and we do that through our Dragonfly Cafe, which is a virtual network that started kind of when COVID was at its peak, and we have continued to try to think of new and interesting ways for all of our Dragonfly members to stay engaged across the globe. So this is a space for peer support. Sometimes it is more structured and we have a specific topic that we would like to discuss. And other times it is just a way for people to get together and understand that there are others who are experiencing similar things. And then our third component is the research. So what is different about academic research settings that can sometimes amplify or highlight some of these things that we're going to talk about today, including burnout. So we have an entire team who volunteers their time to making sure that we are using evidence-based approaches in our conversations. I mentioned we are a team of volunteers. So initially founded in 2020, we always like to say we are for academics, by academics. So all of the friendly faces that you see on the screen, plus many, many more, are at different points in their academic research careers. Some are still trainees. Some have moved on to be faculty members. Some have moved on to do research outside of the academic research settings. So last count, we have over 300 volunteers from across 45 countries. Our programs are customizable. So what we're going to talk about today is, like I said, the basics of burnout, but we also have a variety of other programs, including things like mental health literacy, which is defining those common mental health terms, diseases, and disorders to make sure that we have a great understanding, doing those skills-based workshops to, again, arm people with tools to go out and really create change after these programs, and then continuing to reduce that stigma. So we will jump right in. Mental health exists on a spectrum. What you see on the screen is one far end of the spectrum, someone who has good mental health, who is healthy and well. But we know that things happen. Right? We all exist in a world where there are a lot of things outside of our control. There's a lot of things kind of ongoing all of the time, and we acknowledge that. However, when this happens repeatedly, or when this happens to a point where we don't have skills in order to move us towards a mentally healthy state, we can lead to a state of distress. Now, disease is something that is going to be more persistent. So it's going to be signs or symptoms that are happening more often than not, may even be starting to impact someone's day-to-day life, whether that's their work or their home life. And then someone that's in crisis is really that person who needs that immediate help and support from a professional. So burnout kind of lives in a middle zone here where you've had a lot of stress, you maybe even have had repeated distress, but it's not so frequent that that it could be categorized as a disease. So we're going to kind of talk about this middle zone here for the rest of our time today. We also need to acknowledge that postgraduate education is unique. So at least here, in the States, a lot of university wellness programs don't actually cater or target graduate students, postdoctoral trainees, or faculty. So typically these wellness programs are designed and built for the undergraduate population. We also understand that there's cultural and systemic barriers that make graduate students and faculty less likely to receive support. So we mentioned stigma times already today, and sometimes the idea that you may be perceived differently because you are struggling, because you may be approaching kind of that right-hand side of the screen, right? Disease or crisis, can make people hesitant to even have a conversation with a colleague or a friend. We also want to acknowledge that postgraduate education and faculty positions come with unique pressures and culture, right? So working in an academic research setting is not in many organizations. It's not even always the same as working, at the undergraduate level or working in a hospital setting, even though there are a lot of similarities. This is the definition of burnout that we have landed on here at Dragonfly that we think really communicates well what we see in practice. So, the World Health Organization has defined burnout as a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. We're going to talk more about kind of those signs and symptoms and feelings here in a second, but very briefly, this comes from their diagnostic criteria. It's that feeling of energy depletion or exhaustion, right? Mental distancing from one job, kind of not being interested or not seeing value in the work that you're doing anymore, feeling negative or cynical related to one's job. I always think it's that idea of, what does it even matter? Right? Does it matter if I show up and do my job today, or will they just get someone else to do it? Who can suffer from burnout? When this was originally defined in the literature, burnout was initially just seen as an occupational task. So, all of the initial studies and all of the initial conversations that were going on with burnout were just talking about being burnout from work and typically helping professions. So, things like nurses, doctors, school teachers. Since then, there has been a lot of ongoing research, and the updated kind of population is anyone who's doing a goal directed activity can suffer from burnout. So you can be burnt out in a volunteer task that you have, right? Something that you don't necessarily to engage in, that you've chosen to engage in, but you can still be burnt out. We heard this a lot kind of in popular media in the last couple of years about like parenting and caregiving and being burnt out from those caregiving tasks. But then we know that all of these other categories fit in, right? Students, including graduate students, trainees, postdocs, people who do people work and research, even though we're in the lab, we are interacting and engaging and collaborating with a lot of other people. So what does this look like? One, there's an internal portion. So this is the idea of, right, take a look in the mirror, do some self-reflection. Is there some emotional or physical exhaustion? No matter how much you sleep, how much rest you get, you're feeling like you're never kind of ready to take on the day. Is there reduced emotional regulation? So this is that idea that you um, can kind of go from that mental healthy and well side to stress or crisis even very quickly. You just don't have the buffering of your emotions in order to stay closer to that end of the mentally well spectrum. Some people have noted cognitive impairment, so kind of not being able to process or produce cognitively in the same way that they had when they were not in a state of burnout. Includes reduced memory and attention. So, not being able to focus on a conversation, not being able to focus on a task in order for that to be completed. And then sleeping problems. And this can look a couple of different ways. It could be that you sleep a lot, right? Related back to that physical exhaustion at the top, that you just want to continue to sleep and you never feel like you're fully rested. This can also, though, be difficulty falling asleep because of all of these other things, right? Inability to regulate our emotions as well as we once were able. Your interactions also change. This is kind of that outward focused side. You might be irritable. So again, if you're not regulating your emotions well on something that's mildly irritating for you normally, may be more extreme and may lead to some conflict. Sometimes people who are burnout then also choose to withdraw or distance themselves. So rather than, I know that I'm going to be irritated, I'm just going to remove myself from that situation. I'm not going to engage with my lab mates. I'm not going to follow up with my colleague on that conversation because it doesn't feel like the best option for me. You're going to start to see reduced performance. And this again comes from two places. One, if you don't feel like you have kind of your full cognitive capacity, so you don't feel like your brain is working as you expect it to, that's going to be hard to produce work. But that cynicism, which is at the bottom of this interaction, can also start to really impact our performance. I mentioned this on that last slide, that idea that does my work really matter? Do I still see value in what I am doing? People who are experiencing burnout can also be really inflexible. They want to do things that work for them. They don't want necessarily to work with other people or to be open to ideas. So burnout can be situational, which means that if you are burnt out in one of those domains of your life, you may not be burnt out in the other. For example, you may be burnt out in parenting or in caregiving if you are taking care of another loved one, but be doing just fine at your job. So you may be able to kind of compartmentalize or maintain high functioning in one aspect of your life while not being able to maintain functioning in another aspect of your life. There is kind of this common misconception that this is just what happens. This is what happens to people who are high functioning. This is what happens to people that have a lot going on. I will give the caveat that that doesn't necessarily have to be true. And in a few slides, we will talk about some of the solutions that we can hold as an individual, but also that we can hold if we are a leader or have some power to change what our schedule or what our working style looks like. Every day could be different. So some days you'll be fine. I think burnout really comes into the conversation when more often than not, you are having these feelings of disconnect or irritability and not wanting to engage. But it's not static or inevitable. Okay. We're going to talk, like I said, about all of the ways that we can start to make some of these changes. There are a lot of things that go into burnout. Um, One, it's that chronic stress related to whatever domain you're feeling burnt out in. That idea that no matter what you do, there continues to be work ahead. And that you can't figure out quite how to manage, how to get all of the things done. Role is a core component of someone who feels burnt out. If I don't get to choose what activities I do, or I don't get to choose how I prioritize those activities, then I am more likely to feel less engaged and maybe become more cynical about my work. Bullying or toxic work environments and relationships can also lead to burnout. So, this is again that idea that it may not necessarily be the work that is leading to the burnout. Parenting example, right? Actually, not actually be something about your child that is leading you to feel burnt out about parenting and caregiving, but maybe it is just really stressful time. Work-life balances. So again, this is kind of related to the first two. If you don't have an understanding or a way to manage all of the different activities that are going on in your life, then it can be tricky to figure out which one of these is the most important and which one of these should I maybe pause and wait to come back to later. Sometimes we also have tasks that are assigned without the ability to say no or without the ability to negotiate what other activities or tasks we might give up in order to take on extra job duties, which then can lead to that disconnect from values. So if you took a job, originally accepted a position, and then were continuously being given additional tasks and didn't align with what you originally agreed to do, that can start to feel like it's not right. That's not what you signed up for, the job that you thought you were getting. It's also really important. And this says lack identity beyond work, but I would say lacking an identity beyond whatever the task is. So this is true beyond your work. I am more than just a scientist. I am also a person. I am more than just executive, my job, right? I also am just a colleague. I'm more than just a parent. I am also a sibling. This is an example of kind of how some of those causes or factors can start to interact with each other. And you can see that Harvard Business Review has put this together in kind of a cyclical, because some of the causes can lead to symptoms, and then that can further exacerbate more causes. And then those symptoms continue, like I said, to worsen the situation. All of these we have already talked about. You can have social withdrawal. Then when you're alone, maybe you're unable to concentrate because you're thinking about the social situation that you chose not to engage in. Then you're inefficient with your time because you're kind of mentally split between the task at hand and thinking about what is actually going on. Work then starts to lead into home life more. So rather than having those nice boundaries of I'm going to work when I'm at work, and then when I get home, I might check my email once just to make sure that I took care of everything, but then I'm not going to check my email again until next day. It's exhausting, right? If you are just constantly thinking about things and on the go, it's no wonder that you might be tired. And then that can lead to that cynicism of, oh, do I even really care about this thing, which can again push you into social withdrawal. So what we know is that employees who are caught in this cycle, or really anyone who is caught in this cycle, able to verbalize that they're not satisfied with the current situation. And they're often able to tell you that they don't feel like they're accomplishing that much or being as productive. And so in 2020, Gallup actually collected data. Well, they collected in 2019 and published in 2020, and just asked. They gave this definition of burnout, and 76% of employees said they experience burnout at least sometimes, right? With 28% saying often or always. And so this Gallup study also looked at other components of these people's work. So they had asked them, how many sick days have you taken in the last few months? They found was that people who ranked higher on that burnout scale were 63% more likely to take a sick day, 23% more likely to visit the emergency room, half as likely to discuss with their manager their performance. So that's a little bit of that cynicism and withdrawal, right? We're just not even going to talk about it. 2.6 times as likely to be seeking another job. So now again, we have those split tasks. If you're going to supposed to be working on my job, but I'm also spending a significant amount of my time, energy, attention looking elsewhere for something that seems like it could be a better fit with my values, but also maybe a better balance of those tasks, right? We talked about, do you feel like you have control over the situation? Do you feel like you have room to negotiate if an opportunity rises? The same respondents were asked, what did they think? They said that when they have more time, when they had the option to stretch out a project or to put something on pause in order to focus on something else, that actually reduced their reports of burnout. So having that time and space and that balance throughout your day can be a protective factor. What about burnout specifically in academics? So we just talked about the Gallup poll, right? They talked to people all across the world. During COVID, and a peak COVID when COVID first started in 2020, the Chronicle of Higher Education surveyed academics in the US. At that point, 69% said they reported feeling stressed, 68 they were fatigued, and 35% were angry. And anger is not something that we've talked about yet, but it comes along burnout. Um, Anger is what you can think about as a secondary emotion. So it usually comes about there's some other emotion. So maybe you're feeling disconnected, right? Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed. Maybe you're feeling disappointed. Your job isn't what you thought it would be. And then so the same population, percent of them said they were seriously considering changing their career or retiring early because of the stress. So that goes again back into that those value judgments. So is this something that I want to continue to do? They specifically also talked to junior scientists, and the pressure was a little bit different. Um, so junior scientists, specifically those who, were either kind of postdocs going into the job market or those who had just been in faculty positions for a few years, said that it didn't feel different. It just felt like there was more stress. So many of these things, right, having to write grants and be with your students and do collaborations were all present previously, but now the intensity had been amplified. So there was a lot of negative things that we just talked about, but I hope that the next couple of slides will be a little glimmer that can be helpful. So, number one, social support. You heard me say this on, I think, the fourth slide when I was introducing Dragonfly. We know that having social connections is protective actually against most mental health diseases or diagnoses. So if you have social support, even if you have a diagnosable condition, you actually have more positive outcomes when you have a community that you can rely on. This can be family, this can be your friends or your colleagues, right? This could be maybe just people in your community, your neighbors, that you can go to or even ask for help, right? Because again, a lot of burnout comes from having so many tasks and activities that we don't know to prioritize. And it's not just self care. Self care isn't important, right? We can do a lot for ourselves, but it does go beyond that. So other tasks that we can think about, what's taking breaks or vacation? You or anything like me, you may have vacation time that you may not take because you feel like there is always more work to be done, and it feels better to focus on the work rather than taking those breaks or vacation. But what I like to tell people is you don't have to take 2 weeks off. You don't even have to take 2 days off back to back to see the benefit of that. What we want to see is some sort of oscillation between the work that you're doing and that ability to take a break. So there's a couple different techniques we can use kind of in our day to day. You can do what's called the Pomodoro technique. So we're starting to break our work into chunks. There's, you can go look it up. The example that we have here is for every 15 minutes, 50 minutes of work, then break for 10 minutes. This you can think about too in meetings or in seminars. Maybe don't schedule the meeting to run the full. Make sure that people, if they have something starting at the top of the next hour, have time for a transition. We also want to make these, what we have here is necessary, efficient, and joyful. So, can you go take a walk outside? Do you need to check in with yourself, right? Kind of your priorities. You need to drink some water. You need to use the restroom. One of our colleagues here at Dragonfly gave the example of when she is working, she might be printing things intermittently, but she saves walking to the printer kind of for the end of her 50-minute working block. So she goes ahead and she sends everything, but then when she goes to the printer, that's her break. She might take the long way to the printer because it gets her out of her immediate work. Colleagues is also great, right? Even if we talk about work a little bit, it does give us a chance for that social connection and that social interaction in a different setting. So sometimes just getting outside of our normal sphere, our normal environment can be really helpful. So the next one that's up here on the screen, right? Negotiating better working hours, accommodations, or communication. This can be really tricky, especially if you are a graduate student, a trainee, even a postdoc in a kind of presumed position of lower power. And so I would encourage you to think about this instead as more of a negotiation. So, for example, if my supervisor comes to me and he says, I have a really exciting opportunity for you to help me write a book chapter, right? That is a really exciting opportunity. And what I might remind my supervisor is that I'm currently supervising 2 research assistants. I'm already scheduled to go to a conference in the next couple of weeks. And so I'm working on getting ready to travel, and then I'll be out of the lab for a little bit. And there might be additional, research deadline that I'm facing. So I might say to him, okay, I'm really excited about the book chapter. Here are the things that I'm currently working on. If I work on the book chapter with you, would it be possible for someone else to supervise one or both of my research assistants for a few weeks so I could focus on what I'm doing? And so this idea of kind of negotiation, it's not that we're saying no, it's we're saying, let's think about how we do this in a different way. Accommodations might also be necessary. Again, we all have our different preferences or our different ways we like to engage with our work. I know that when I need to do a lot of focused work, I prefer to work from home. I am really lucky a job that lets me do that 1 or 2 days a week. And when I really need to do that intensive, writing or a literature review, that I'm not getting interrupted with people in and out of my office, because when I'm home, I am alone and I have time to focus. And then communication. So for not all of us is communication an easy tool or an easy thing to do, but I would encourage you to think about how you best communicate and then communicate that out. So I have a sign actually outside of my office that says, I really prefer direct communication. So if you have a deadline, I prefer to know what the deadline is up front. If you are asking something of me, I prefer to know that up front. Then if you have more context to give, you can kind of put that at the end. But it's this idea of whatever the most important need is, please let me know it first so that I can start to figure out if I have time or how I can help you problem solve getting that thing done. There are other people who like the context first and kind of like that storytelling approach to communication. And there is no right or wrong way. It is simply whatever works best for you, and making sure that you have communicated that out to the people that you're working with so that you can have that efficiency and you can have that understanding in your work. Seeking support and building better relationships work. I'm not asking you to be, best friends with everyone that you work with, but I am encouraging you to be friendly, to think about what it is that we need as humans, right? That idea of social support and community, and how if we build those relationships with those that we work with, we will actually lead to a healthier environment for all of us and some better work-life balance or integration. So for advice, so we actually turned this over to colleagues here at Dragonfly and we said, one, have you ever felt burnout? And then what helped you? So this is very much from the non-clinical perspective. There's no clinical research to support that these things are true. So one, don't internalize burnout as a failure. Burnout is a result of a system, right? A system that expects people to work long hours and to not necessarily take personal lives or that social connection into perspective. So we're here to tell you that we want that to be part and that it is okay to have those personal connections. And in fact, it's necessary. Ways to detach from stress, right? Think about ways that when you leave work, you leave the lab, right? You leave the university campus, what can you do to kind of pour back into yourself? For some people, that might mean exercising or being outside. For some people, that might mean, cooking really delicious food and maybe sharing that food, either with your family or roommates, or neighbors in a way to connect. For some people, something like reading a book that has nothing to do with their with their job. So reading some good fiction, or some personal development books in a way to kind of not have all of your time again dedicated to whatever it is that is causing you to feel this burnout. We at Dragonfly also are continuing to want to reduce stigma. So having these conversations about mental health, even if you are not someone who, has a diagnosis, um, just expressing how you're feeling in a situation can be really helpful and can really open up conversation about how people might be feeling. So even saying something like, if we go back to the example, writing the book chapter, hey, that's really exciting. But with all of these other things that I've currently been assigned, I just think that would be too overwhelming, and I don't think I would be capable of doing it all well, right? And being willing to have that conversation and then problem solve together. So sometimes the way that someone else is going to approach a situation is very different to approach a situation. I always tell people to take that as an invitation, to take it as a gift, that someone else is going to maybe have a different solution than you do. And then really fighting that isolation. So again, going out, even if you just have one person that you can talk to and tell, that is protective. I know it may not seem like it, um, but it is okay, whether that's, a roommate, a family member, another loved one, to stay engaged and to stay in communication. And then this is my favorite here at the bottom. I would say treat yourself like a tree, treat yourself like a plant. Um, you still need sunshine, you need water, you need to breathe fresh air, you need nutrients, right? You need ground or space, right? You need your own space in which to operate. And then you also need that space to grow. And so I really think about this last one as, you cannot stay in one place all of the time. So we can't do all of our existing work. We have to think about how we can exist in other spaces as well to be ourselves. So burnout, when it is work related, it does have, we're just going to point out a slightly different lens here. Most of these things that we've already talked about, that emotional, physical exhaustion, reduced resilience, we haven't actually talked about yet, but it is a little bit related to that ability, or inability, if you will, to not be able to pick up new tasks or switch as easily. So again, most of the same things help. How can you seek support, reach out to people? Are you taking the breaks that you're entitled to? Are you taking the vacation time that you would? We also wanted to point out that depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety, are all actually pretty highly comorbid. with burnout. That means that they do coexist at a pretty high rate. And here what you see at the top are lifetime prevalences for depression. Here, that 6.7% is a lifetime prevalence or point prevalence for depression. But when a survey was done of graduate students across the globe, actually, 39% reported feelings consistent with depression, and they used clinically validated scales. And then the second set of numbers you see, that 6% is anxiety, kind of in the general population, and then 41% is what was seen in graduate student population. So again, we know that treatment, including having good social supports, is the most effective way to help people, and that includes suicide prevention. And if we look at some of these symptoms, they look pretty similar to the things we've already discussed with burnout. So you may have changes in your mood, right? You may not have as much energy. You may have these thoughts that, oh, I don't really care about any of these things. There are a lot of causes for depression, bipolar disorder, and anxiety that are listed on this screen, and we kind of have grouped these together for the purpose of talking about this today. But the best thing that you can do is to treat those underlying conditions. So I had mentioned there is some overlap between burnout, depression, and anxiety, in that you can be diagnosed with both simultaneously. There is actually not a root cause that is connected to both, being that you can, like I said, get diagnosed for both, or you can get diagnosed with only one and the other. So when someone is experiencing symptoms that they think is burnout, I would encourage them to also have a conversation with a medical professional about anxiety and depression to make sure that we're getting treatment for the appropriate thing. So burnout is a lot of social interaction, managing our time, versus anxiety and depression. We may need to do more intensive therapy or even pharmaceutical treatment. So down here at the bottom are different screeners or assessments that can be used for these different concepts. So there are a few different burnout screeners. The one that is kind of the oldest, but the original, maybe the most well validated, is the MBI. That was one that was initially started to look at burnout in the workplace, although the lab that's been working on that started to actually create variations of the assessments for different activities. So one specifically for parenting, one specifically for, burnout in education, right? We know that getting a master's degree, getting a PhD, and becoming a physician are all really long processes. And so they have started to collect data and then add new questions to these assessments. A common depression screener or depression assessment is the PHQ-9, and then a common anxiety screen is the GAD-7. So again, these are all going to look at these distinct constructs, and you can be diagnosed with more than one, but they are actually separate. So with that, I will thank you all for joining us today. I will pull up the chat. So if you have questions, I am more than happy to hang around. I don't need to rush away. I would encourage you to scan the QR code on your screen, or you can type in that small URL to give us some feedback. Like I mentioned, we are for academics, by academics. Burnout is just one of our handful of programs, and we are always looking to improve. So if you have feedback for us, that goes to our leadership team, and they will review, and we will update our programs as necessary.
Thank you so much, Mary, for the wonderful section and insight into how we can deal with burnout. I think everyone here is so glad. I'm sure that we've had similar experiences along the way. And I think now we'll open the floor for questions, or if you can share your own experiences about maybe how you went through something like that and how you dealt with it. And I'm going to begin. I think when I was an undergrad, I realized that there were times where it gets really tough, right? So I think what I did was I would make sure that during the day I do what I need to do. If it's learning, I'll do all of that in the day. And then in the evening, I'll, let's say, watch a movie or something that I know I'm going to enjoy. And I think that
Mhm.
helped me even through exam periods, right? So even during the tough exam periods, I would learn during the day, and then in the evening, I'm relaxed. Even if I have a paper the next day, I'm relaxed. And I think that carried out through after uni and when the working schedules got tough. There was a period where I was handling a lot of different projects, but I always had that idea of, oh, I'm going to take a break in the evening, or maybe when it was too busy, I'm going to take a break over the weekend and watch a movie or watch football or something like that. That really helped kind of manage the workload. Having that impression that I'm going to have a celebration or a win in the evening or at the end of the weekend kind of helped manage it. So when you were talking about finding ways to distress, I was quite happy about that point because it really, really helps. And it really helped me kind of manage some of the increasing schedules. Yeah.
Yeah, and everyone is going to have something different. And so watching a movie, I'll own, for me, wouldn't wouldn't be what would make me feel the best. But I know that if I have been really busy work, then if I can go take a walk, that
Wow.
is so great for me. A lot of the work that I do is in front of a computer screen. I don't, I have a beautiful window in my office, but I'm up on the second floor. And so I can't um, get out. But when I get home at the end of the day, if the sun is still shining, then that is something that's easy for me to do, and that I know makes me feel a lot better. And the people around me, and I keep mentioning, right, community and social support. The people around me know to suggest that um, if they can sense that I, have been having it, they might ask, "Have you taken a walk today? Is there something that I can do? Can we go take a walk together?" And so knowing and being able to share what helps for you can also be an external reminder.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah.
So we also, I did just drop the link in the survey because someone had asked. So if you can't use the QR code and you are interested in providing feedback, please feel free to grab it from the chat. And I think there's one other comment that I just kind of want to bring into the conversation, that Joe had mentioned, that we need to take appropriate measures to create the safe spaces, regardless of what it is that you're dealing with, whether it's burnout, whether it's depression, whether you are neurodivergent and you just need to interact with the world in a different way. And I would 100% endorse that. Again, it's going to be different for everyone. Some people, it really fills their cup to go and be in community. I know I have loved ones who, um, when they are stressed, it actually feels better for them to, go out for dinner and be with a group of friends. Versus for me, I want to take my walk and then be in quiet. Because that's what I need, and that is okay.
I think the floor is still open. We would love to hear what works for people in terms of managing their increasing work schedules. I think some of these may overlap, and I would love to add some of these things. Mary, I'll try the work you suggested, yeah, and see if I can add it to my arsenal. Yeah.
If you don't like it, find something different. It might be, if the movies work for you, that is great. Or maybe it's, I know actually when I was a graduate student, I like to bake, and then I would take, cupcakes and cookies, and I would go share them with other graduate students. And that was something that I really enjoyed during that time in my life.
That's wonderful.
Austin, I see you have your hand up. Do you want to come off mute?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, my camera is not working. I don't know what the problem is, but thank you. I think I will go with what Mary has said. There are two things that I do in a week, okay, daily. And first, thank you, Mary, for I think what I get out of it is to treat myself as a tree. That one, thank you. So I don't know, but yes, I don't know, but it just fell into my what I really have been doing, because I treat myself as a treat the fact that I actually bought, this mats that I use for grounding, where I can connect to the wall. So when I'm working at night in my lab, I wish my camera was showing. When I'm working at night in my lab, then I spread it and connect it. Then I step on it for maybe the 4 hours I'm working at night. But now the weather is changing. But every day I make sure that I make like 20 minutes walk to just get to the sun. Now, because the sun is going, I keep on stepping out quickly, looking through the window to see whether there is any light. And then if it is, I rush quickly because it will be taken away by the clouds quickly. Yeah, and then I make sure by force 3 times. We have a gym at the university, but I have refused to subscribe to that. I subscribe to another one, which is like a kilometer or 1 kilometer or 1.5, 2 kilometers away, so that I go 3 times. So that forces me to do the strength training, so that to avoid is because I'm sitting for long for my back, and then it forces me to walk 3 times, because if I take the one in the university, it means in 10 minutes I'm inside the gym, so I'll not get the opportunity to walk, and I don't have time to budget to walk. Yeah, so I think
you're bundling things together, because
yes,
you're getting your walk, and you're getting outside, and you're getting to the gym.
yeah.
So I like that idea of doing, you kind of got multiple things going at once.
So what I think I need to borrow now is that business of like talking to colleagues, the way you take maybe cookies to colleagues, how are you doing, and all that. And I think that is what I will know. I just look for conversation buddies that I can just go converse them. What is happening? Can we talk a bit or something like that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I love that idea. So and I'm gonna forget the woman who shared this with me. But sometimes when her schedule is really busy and she knows that she has to go from one meeting to another, and someone needs her time, she will invite them to walk with her. So, if you're on a university campus and you have to go from one building to another, it might take you only for some minutes. But if invite the person to walk with you, and then you're going to get a little bit of conversation. It's not a significant amount of time, but it's an opportunity to connect in a different way. And so that is something that I always try to remember, is that there's constantly going to be transition. You're going to be, you know, maybe walking even just from your desk to a break room to grab a meal. Well, can you invite someone to do that with you? Or maybe you're going to have to walk to, a colleague's office down the hall. Is there someone else that can walk with you, to get where you're going? And so you get a little bit of that social interaction as well.
Thank you so much, Mary.
Thank
It looks like
you.
our time is almost up, kind of, but then would you be happy to stay on for a few minutes if there are any questions?
Yes, I am free. So if anyone else has any questions, you can feel free to come off mute or drop it in the chat. I can watch that there. And if you need to
Wonderful.
go, I also understand. I know it is later in the day for you all.
So we would love to continue to hear how people deal with their stressing schedule. So I think thank you so much, Austin, for sharing. It was wonderful hearing from you. Yeah. Yeah, Aman. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, if I'm just usually I'm just working at the night and because in the daytime we may have engaged in different field work activities. So just to focus on, usually I'm using, especially the midnight. So at that time, what kind of, refreshment or something is really recommended at that time? Usually I take kind of, because I don't want to drink or something at the midnight. So I wanted to take 10 minutes or 20 minutes rest. Then I wake up and start my work. So
Yeah,
would you, yeah,
I'd
thank
love
you.
to. Yeah, I'd love to know what other people think. I love like herbal teas when I just want even when it's warm outside and it's getting to the colder part of the year here where I live, but even when it's warm outside, by the time the evening comes around, it usually is a little bit cooler. I don't necessarily want the caffeine, right? And maybe don't necessarily want alcohol either. But that idea that if I can do like a nice herbal tea, it's a little bit of flavor. You have the heat, and there's also that the sensory component, not just of drinking warm tea, but of being, maybe able to hold the cup in your hand. And there's so many different flavors now. And if you get really into it, I have friends that love tea and they will actually even blend different combinations. And some of them promote, nice things like relaxation and sleep. Some teas are really good for digestion. So during those times, I think at the end of the night when you just need a little bit of something different, I think that's one thing that has worked for me. I'm interested if anyone else has other ideas though.
Yeah, thank you so much for the clip. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, so the floor is still open. We'd love to hear any questions or contributions from our wonderful community. I think Mary has made it so obvious that everyone has how they deal with some of these stresses, and you just have to find what works for you, what really makes you feel relaxed, how you can kind of manage the workloads and ensure that periodically you take those breaks that help you still stay on top of everything. So it's been a wonderful session, and it's so wonderful to hear people sharing how they manage some of these things. And we would love to hear more, but we are so quickly running out of time, unfortunately. Yeah. So the floor is still open, maybe a minute more to allow anyone with a question to ask. If not, then we'll be closing the curtains on today's wonderful session. Yeah. So the floor is still open. Anyone? If not, then Mary would ask you if you have any final words or advice for us. Would be happy to hear that.
Yeah, I would just encourage you all to think about the word I'll leave you with. So whether it is, your personal style is to get up and start working first thing in the morning. And if that's the case, great. But then making sure that you give some of yourself some of that time at the end of the day. I am the reverse. I like to start slow in the morning, and I don't schedule meetings usually first thing in the morning for myself because I like that time. Which also means that my natural working style is to work later. That has not always been the case. I used to be an early bird, so I think the other thing I would just leave you with is change is also okay. find what works for you now. And if it stops working.
Thank you so much, Mary. It was really, really wonderful to have you and be part of this session. Yeah, we hope it's not the last. Our family would love to have you on other occasions in the future. Yeah.
Absolutely. Dragonfly would love to be back. Like I said, we have many, many programs. You are all welcome to go to our website, look at our programs, find us on social media, shoot us an email. We would love to stay in touch.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us today and for being part of this wonderful session. We would see you at our next session. We'll probably send updates about that if there's any. Thank you everyone and have a really, really wonderful day. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.